the longer you pay attention, you become the thing you pay attention to.
You have to be willing to accept intuition, and a lot of people aren't. And I think that willingness is a terribly, terribly important function in the process of accessing your intuition.
But what happens is we get stuck in the left brain with the focus, and then we make a rule out of it, and we define it, and we get separated from the whole.
I would say the first element is to love yourself. And you first have to have a strong sense of who you are, a soul having a human experience, that you're a soul having a human experience, not the other way around.
So when I was trying to only make decisions from the mind, it was very conflictual.
There's a term that I call that you experienced on the road. There's no way you can avoid it, and I believe it's how you may have done some of your filming, at least for this movie. I call it road magic. It's the synchronicities, the people that you bump into in the road, that there is zero odds of this taking place, and yet it just happened time and time again, and it steers you to just the right place at just the right time.
I mean, that's why I love road movies so much, and you're absolutely right. There is a section of the Camino called the Meseta. It's about a 200-kilometer stretch of essentially straight, flat plain. And it's incredibly confronting to some people. Some people absolutely freak out on the Meseta, or they avoid it altogether. I loved it, and I believe that as a pilgrim, you are defined by how you react to the Meseta. What you've got with the Meseta, and this goes back to what you were saying, Michael, is this. You've got this long, straight stretch. It goes endless, endless, endless. And you get into this metronomic, hypnotic kind of zone where you're listening to your feet on the path. You're listening to your walking poles go clack, clack, clack. There might be the wind. I never listened to any music or any headphones or anything like that. I was always open to the sound of the elements around me. And what happens is that you disconnect from your rational brain. You go into this kind of meditative, metronomic kind of state, and that allows these intuitive signals, these intuitive impulses to come in. And I found it quite extraordinary. But getting back to my theory, I've got a theory on most things. You see, I was amazed. I looked around me and I saw people 80, 85 years old walking 800 kilometers. I saw people with cancer walking 800 kilometers. I saw all of these extraordinary miracles happening around me each day, and I began to wonder why. And what I believe is this. This is a pilgrimage path that has been active for over 1,000 years. And I believe that the path has this spiritual imprint, this energetic imprint that is left by the spiritual intention of every footfall of every pilgrim that has walked before. And we're talking about tens of millions of pilgrims that have walked that path over the years. And I believe this spiritual imprint is there in the path, and it seeps up. It seeps up into the energetic system of pilgrims that come later, if they allow it. And that's the big caveat, if they allow it. Because there are some people who walk the Camino and they just simply don't allow it. They see it as an athletic exercise, or they see it as a party trip or something like that. And they don't allow this. They've got barriers in their feet chakras, that stop this energy coming up. But those that do allow it and are willing to accept it, I think they can have a most extraordinary transformative experience walking the Camino. And interestingly, I didn't realize this, but I learned it later. The author who wrote The Alchemist, Paul Coelho,
oh, yes.
How you pronounce his name?
Yep. As best as I can pronounce it.
Yeah, I always get his pronunciation wrong. But he walked the Camino before he wrote The Alchemist, and he attributes a lot of the insight that he had into The Alchemist by having walked the Camino.
There's an important word. When you said people allow it, the word that comes to mind is presence. You shut off the radio. I did a 5,000-mile journey myself on bicycle many years ago, and you shut off the radio. You go quiet. You be with the experience. Like you said, you're rhythmically with your footfalls, and I think that allows the magic to take place.
Yeah, I really believe so. One of the things about intuition, which we might get to later, is the fact that you have to be willing. You have to be willing to accept intuition. And a lot of people aren't. And I think that willingness is a terribly, terribly important function in the process of accessing your intuition.
So let's go from there, and then let's talk about what was the seed. It was a very big seed that was the impetus for making this movie, or going on this journey to meet all of these masters and figure out what's going on. What happened when you were driving in the States one day?
Look, I was working on a movie. It was a thriller. I was shooting in New Orleans, and it was very early in the piece. I was there by myself doing early location work, and I was driving to the airport, the New Orleans airport. I had to get the first flight back to Los Angeles. It was early in the morning. It was before dawn, and as I approached an intersection, I had a green light up ahead. In fact, I'd slept in and I was running late. I was sort of eager to get the car into the rental place and so forth. But as I approached this intersection, I heard a voice, and the voice said, "Slow down." I never heard a voice like this before, ever. And my inclination was to speed up so that I got through on the green so that I didn't get held up on the red light. And I went to accelerate, and the voice said again, "Slow down." It said slow down twice. And I did slow down. And then as soon as I entered the intersection, out of nowhere, a huge truck ran a red light on my right-hand side coming through a cross street. It hurtled through the intersection. I then jammed on my brakes, and it just narrowly missed me. And then I pulled up on the other side of the intersection. I was shaking, and adrenaline kicked in and so forth. But had I not listened to that voice, had I not slowed down before entering that intersection, that truck would have smashed straight into me and I would have been killed. I have no doubt about that whatsoever. It triggered 3 questions in me. What was that voice? Where did it come from? And why was my life saved? And I couldn't get those 3 questions out of my head. And those 3 questions propelled me then 18 years. From that time when that happened to now is 18 years. For 18 years, those 3 questions propelled me through this whole process.
Phenomenal. And it is, when you look back on it, I have to think one of the reasons that you were, quote, spared is because that was the keystone event that had to take place, the one domino that had to fall for all of these other events to later take place.
Yeah. When I think, I didn't realize that at the time, but now when I look back on it, you're absolutely right. And I have to ask, why was my life saved? And one of the questions, as you know, in the film, I ask is, well, why me? I'm not special. It's not like I've lived a saintly life and deserve to be saved. So why is my life saved? That was a question that dogged me for a long time.
Your life was, quote, saved because then you would go on this journey and share your story with countless others, and it would have such meaning and, well, forgive the pun, impact.
Yeah. Well, look, it's really interesting, Michael, when I got word that I was going to be on your show, I immediately went into this fit of absolute abject terror.
Oh, no. I am so sorry, Bill.
Because, you see, you have these amazing people on your show, and they're incredibly knowledgeable and articulate, and they're experts. And you see, I'm not an expert. I'm just a regular bloke who had this thing happen, and I had curiosity, and I've got the technical skills to be able to put that curiosity into a form, that now presents itself as a film that I can show to people. But you see, I will never channel. I mean, I still have trouble meditating. I meditate each day now, but it's a struggle each day to keep my mind still. People talk about monkey minds. My mind is like a rampaging gorilla that's been tasered. That's what my mind is like, but each day I do my best, which is, what I believe you're required to do. But yeah, you're absolutely right. My job is to be what I am, and that is a regular person. This thing happened to them, and now I'm able to go out and tell people what happened and how it changed my life. And the thing about it is this, is that in showing the film to people as I have in Australia, one thing which happens time and time again is that everybody wants to come up and they want to tell me about their intuitive experience, about, the voice that saved their life, or, some kind of intervention that helped them either from death or injury. So what happened to me is not unusual. It's not special at all. It happens all the time. And that's one of the astonishing things that I found in the making of this film.
So let's talk about that, and let's talk about one of my all-time favorite guests. And I'm curious what the intuitive path was that led you to him, and that's Paul Selig.
Well, okay. So to answer that question, I need to probably go back one step, and that is I tried to make this film initially the way I've made every other film. And I've been quite successful at making films over a long period of time. And the way that I made films in the past has been through, let me put it kindly, type A personality traits.
Dot your I's, cross your T's.
Well, exactly. And don't let any obstacles stand in your way, and push through no matter what the cost.
Oh,
well,
here comes the 2x4.
Exactly. I tried that with this film, and it just didn't work, and I was getting nowhere, and it just wasn't happening, and I was getting more and more dispirited. Mm-hmm. My intuition, my instinct, my commercial brain, if you like, told me that this would be a film that people would want to see, and that it was worth persevering with, but it just wasn't happening the way that I'd done previous films. I realized quite late in the piece that I had to make this film intuitively. But for me to make the film intuitively, it wasn't about reading books or going to workshops or anything like that. I had to actually change. Mm-hmm. I had to actually become intuitive myself. And one of the reasons the film has taken so damn long is because that was a long process for me, to actually take on board what it means to be an intuitive, spiritual person. That, coming, as we talked about before, from my background, that was a huge shift for me. So what happened was this. I never set out with a list of, like the top 25 experts in intuition. I was going to go approach them and tick them off one by one. That never happened. I was led from person to person to person. Everybody who appears in the film was somebody that I was led to. Mm-hmm. I mean, I didn't know who Norm Shealy was with respect to Mr. James Van Praagh. I didn't know who James Van Praagh was. Yeah. I didn't know who most of these people were. Lee Carroll, Judith Orloff, Carolyn Mace, of course. All of these extraordinary people. Now that I realize, they're big deals. But I didn't know that at the time. I was just led to them. And I went, yep, this feels right. I'm going to do an interview with Carolyn and so forth. But with Paul Selig, what happened was this. I had got to the point where I thought, okay, I've got to put a pin in this. I've got to stop filming. It's all finished. Now I've got to start editing. And then one day I was on the internet and I was fooling around. I was looking at books. And up came this book, I Am the Word, which is Paul's first book that is channeled by his guides. And I don't know what it is, Michael. I mean, you look at all these various books on Amazon and so forth all the time. This book just kind of jumped out of the screen, grabbed me by the throat, kind of choked me and said, Bill, you have to read this book. You have to read this book. I read this book, and then I started, as I say, I go on these long walks and I listen to them on an audiobook as well. And Paul does the narration. He does the narrations just like the spirit guides are talking. And I just knew then absolutely I had to go to New York specifically to interview Paul Selig so that he could be in the film. And I would say that Paul has been one of the really major influences on me personally and on the film, in allowing me to make the film in the manner that I have. And wonderful thing is he's become a friend as well, which is fantastic.
Intuition that is literally, if we want to talk about survival of the species, it's time to go that way if we're going to survive at all.
Well, look, absolutely. There are... I was very confused starting out as to what intuition actually is, because it seems such a big catch-all phrase, and people use the term almost indiscriminately without really understanding what it was. And I looked for a definition of intuition. I could never really find a definition that pertained to what happened to me. And I actually came up with my own definition, and that is
awesome.
Intuition. Intuition is a sudden, unexplained insight that comes unaided by logic, intellect, or expertise. Now, a lot of people will say, well, that's not the intuition that I know. You know, like the intuition that, say, a CEO uses to make a complex decision. What I determined, Mike, it took me a long time to realize this. I've come up with these three categories of intuition. There's what I call survival intuition, which is like a mother's intuition for the child, or that fight or flight intuition that we feel when we have a sense that danger is nearby. It's survival of the species. So that's survival intuition. Then there's what I call cognitive intuition. And cognitive intuition is based on past experience or expert knowledge. So that is the intuition that a CEO uses, you know, when they have to make a quick, fast, complex decision. It's the intuition that a scientist might use when they have an intuitive spark that leads to a scientific breakthrough. But it's based on expert knowledge. And then there's what happened to me in a car, and is what this definition is about, is what I call mystical intuition. And mystical intuition is intuition that has no basis in intellect or past experience or expertise or anything like that. It's a voice, you know, it's dreams, it's coincidence and synchronicity, it's precognitive flashes. It's these things that aren't rooted in any kind of logical, rational thought. That's mystical intuition. And that's the intuition that really interests me. And that's the intuition that this film is based on.
So then what started you on your path from graphic designer to intuitive?
Let's see. Somehow I started getting interested in psychic things and the mysteries I think even in high school. But and I started reading a lot of books about that kind of thing on the side. And then I ended up moving to New York City when I was around 20 or so. And found there were, like, I studied with Hans Holzer, the ghost hunter, you know, and a bunch of cool people were doing things, even way back then. And I don't know, I kind of just opened up a lot there, and then came out to California straight from there. And boy, then everything took off. So I actually took classes then, and I realized I could study clairvoyance development.
If we believed it. Isn't that strange to say, if we trusted our intuition, if we believed that our intuition was real?
Well, it's kind of the chicken and the egg, isn't it? You know, I think you have to see, I don't know what caused me to really be interested in the mysteries at a really early age, but I was always delving and penetrating and exploring. So maybe that comes from the soul, and other people are interested in building houses or something, you know, and that's a different fascination, you know.
I've got to think, once you've exposed yourself to people like a ghost hunter, then intuition is just, it's so much easier to believe, because you've already, that's way out there in the spectrum. Not that it's not real, but it's way out there. And so you're coming halfway back to Earth. Right.
But that was interesting too, just because he grounded it with photography. They actually photographed houses where there were supposed to be spirits, and found the photographs were distorted in unusual ways. So there was some kind of physicalness to the existence of it, you know, some kind of, maybe it was like the wake that a boat leaves in the water or something, but it was still, you know, real in a certain way.
So you get out to California, you're being more exposed to it, you're more open to it. What did that mean for you at that time?
It was a very exciting time for me. It was really in the beginning of a lot of the human potential movement. And it was like a smorgasbord in Northern California at that time. So, I mean, I studied everything, nutrition, I took EST, I did, you know, all kinds of things. Started doing Tai Chi and meditating, and it just grew and grew and grew and grew. And shamanism, I mean, everything was there. So it was like making a big stew, just add in another ingredient and another ingredient. And at a certain point, the funny thing was I used to go home at Christmas to visit my parents. And I'd say, well, I'm going to be a graphic designer. Mm-hmm. No, I'm going to be an interior designer. And then finally I came home one year and I said, I know what I'm going to be. I'm going to be a spiritual teacher. And they went, oh, great.
Just lost it now.
And then that's the one that worked.
What is intuition?
Now I start thinking that it is, first of all, it's when you can shift out of the left brain into the right brain, into the body, into the heart, and into the kind of holistic perception that even comes with the energy field around the body. But then I think, too, it's also the holistic perception that we get when we include the left brain back into that. And we have flow, right? We have the flow of being able to access directly from the field of energy. And that's the right brain does that.
Well, that's go ahead.
And then move it back into the left brain so that it makes sense and it kind of completes the circuit. And then let go again and go back to the right brain to get more. So it's an oscillation back and forth, like from the physical to the non-physical to the physical to the non-physical. And that flow to me is very intuitive.
To work on your intuition, you don't just work on your intuitive side, but you work on the balance or the dance between both sides.
Right. It's all about becoming whole, right? And when you move to the right brain, you tend to merge into or become immersed in the field of energy around you, which is pretty much unconscious because it doesn't stop anywhere. In fact, I heard someone say the left brain is the act of interrupting the right brain. Right?
Stop it, I need some boundaries.
Right, no, it's an interruption which allows you to have a focus. If you're just in the right brain, everything's interconnected and you know everything all at once. And that's bliss, but if you want to be in the physical world and get things done, you have to come back over and have a focus and then let go and then have another focus and then let go. So, but what happens is we get stuck in the left brain with the focus and then we make a rule out of it and we define it and we get separated from the whole.
So how do we start to crowbar our way back? Because it's indoctrinated. It's not that easy.
Sure, it's validated. The left brain stuff is so validated in Western culture, for sure. I think that we're starting to see, and this goes into a whole other thing about the acceleration on the planet, which my books Frequency and Leap of Perception are about. But as things are getting faster, the old way of perceiving, which is left-brained and linear, really doesn't work anymore. It's too slow. It's just A, B, C, D, E, but where the right brain, you can shift into that and know it all right now. And you don't have to process, because process is linear. So I think that the times themselves are helping us make the shift. And just because the old way is just not functional. I think the heart is very connected to the right brain and to the body and to the field of energy. So as soon as you get out of the left brain, you're in it, pretty much.
That's good.
And to get out of the left brain, you have to stop talking. Inside your head with the self-talk, yakety yak, and outside, and needing to describe and find meaning in words. So as soon as you get quiet and actually enter silence, and that means also drop into your body, feel, move from thinking into sensing and feeling, which is a really amazing thing when you do that, because it goes out so far, and you can feel, like if you drop, I call it stop and drop, just get into the body and then be in the moment where you are.
So stop and drop. Stop, feel your feet on the ground, feel your tuchus on your seat.
That's it. Right. Get in behind your eyes, look out from behind your eyes, and be there. And then look around. I have my coffee cup. And sometimes I just look at that and I think, well, inside my coffee cup are a bunch of molecules. And if I go down inside all the particles, there's energy, consciousness. it's alive at some level, and that means there are beings in that consciousness, in that huge unified field of the collective consciousness. So somebody's helping that coffee cup come into form with me so I can drink coffee, which is coming into form. And then I go, wow.
Gratitude.
It's like a kinship relationship with objects. And then you go inside. The longer you pay attention, you become the thing you pay attention to. You merge with it, and then you feel it as though it is you. And then you have this intimacy with the little world around you, the ordinary moment. And I guess it's Zen, you could call it that. But to me, it's love, right? And you can do it any moment, anytime. Just stop, drop, and engage and notice what you're noticing and find the life in it, and you'll find yourself in it. It's a simple process.
Where do we start to begin accessing this more and begin strengthening something that's probably atrophied quite a bit since we were kids?
I start simply, the thing I said already about just going into silence and then noticing what you notice and let things surface and don't try to direct the flow. That's one thing. But also just a daily practice for me, you might call it mindfulness, but I just call it working with the inner perceiver, which to me there's a function of our own consciousness that does help us notice what we notice throughout the day in a certain sequence. And there's some reason for that, I think, that I'm trying to get through to myself certain things. So I might notice a synchronicity or some kind of omen as I'm driving down the street, or two birds fly over my car or something, And so then I have a dialogue with this inner part of my own consciousness. Now, some people might call that the Holy Spirit or the inner self, whatever. But I think of it as, part of me, a wise part of me. And so I say, well, why am I noticing this right now? What am I trying to get through to myself, from me to myself? And then it answers me, or I answer me, and that dialogue throughout the day helps keep me conscious and alert and aware and engaged, So I think that connecting consciously with your environment, with the outside world, and realizing it's not really an outside world, it's not separate from us, it's us also. It's doing the same thing in the so-called outer world that we're doing in the inner world of our thoughts. It's totally connected.
It's a living dream.
It is And once you start playing with that, then things do unify. And then you start to get all kinds of other insights about how life is working. Like, if I'm part of a collective consciousness, then where are my thoughts coming from? It's not just from me or from God or something. It's from everyone, because they want me to have those thoughts. So I'll do those things. So I'll give that back into the world so they can have what they need to do their things, to let me have what it just keeps on going.
And a simple for people listening to this or wondering, kind of an example of that is if an inventor comes up with something on one side of the planet, they're in the biggest horse race of their lives to try to get that patented right away, because somebody 12,500 miles away has thought of it at exactly the same time.
Especially these days, because the field we're so telepathic, we're so ultra-sensitive, that these ideas are just flooding through, and not just one person or a couple, but, these are like the ideas
Throngs.
Whose time has come are just flooding in at this point.
So.
And the more open and intuitive people are, of course, the easier it's going to be to have new inventions and innovation. And I think this is going to be the next big wave. Is a huge wave of innovation is coming here soon.
So you've called it actually the information age going to the intuition age.
Yeah, coming from the industrial age, even before that, right, where it was physical. Then that accelerated, I was thinking, well, that got us computers, right? Those were machines. And then the computers jacked us into the information age. And that got faster and faster and faster. And we got the internet. And then that got faster until we can't process the information anymore in a linear fashion. So now we have to make the leap into the right brain, or the intuition age, where the rules really change at this point. and things become nonlinear and holographic and spherical instead, which is a whole other thing, to try to understand while you're still in a linear reality, what the non-linear is going to be like.
So when Spirit speaks to us, and we want to talk today about how we can personally connect with Spirit, but when Spirit is talking with us or Spirit is talking with you, it's not like the made-for-TV or Hollywood movies where we're trying to get the killer and get vengeance or something. This is about a journey of healing the heart.
Exactly right. Good way of putting it. Yeah, healing the heart. Exactly. It's not Hollywood. I did a show called Ghost Whisperer, and it was very important for CBS, which I understand that forum, the network, they wanted something to bring people in, to bring the eyes into the show, which was fear. As you know, fear sells. So the opening of Ghost Whisperer, every single session or show of that episode starts with fear, like there's a ghost that's haunting somebody, and it's very fearful, and that's how we end the first scene. Now that was just to get people into the tent, if you will. And I had many meetings with CBS and Disney about this, and I said, I cannot be involved in this project. I brought you this project, but I can only be involved in it if it's a positive, loving energy that we leave the audience with. Because we have to be responsible for what we put out there in media. I mean, I have a broadcasting degree, and I remember from Marshall McLuhan years ago said, one must be responsible for what they're putting in the airwaves. And this is very true, because when we think of it, Michael, everything is energy. And what we put out to the audience in the air, that becomes reality. So I wanted to make sure we left every episode within a healing, loving space. And then everybody who was watching that show ends up in that loving space. That's my responsibility. And that's responsibility, I think, for all directors and writers out there and producers. That's really what they should be doing. They shouldn't be scaring people, going to that low, basic, thing of like, I got to get to that bottom part of this. Fear should not be there. It should be love. And anyway, that's what I think. And I think that's a responsibility that we have as filmmakers, television, as creators, all of us. Whatever we create should be in the highest vibration possible.
Thank you. I couldn't agree more. So let's talk about love, and let's talk about communicating with love, and let's talk about communicating with Spirit. Does it all start with playing with the vibration of love?
It certainly is the strongest element to start with. Yes, it's the strongest. And when you say about element of love, I would say the first element is to love yourself, and you first have to have a strong sense of who you are. And I'm not talking about an ego sense. I'm talking about who you are as a spiritual being, a soul having a human experience. That you're a soul having a human experience, not the other way around. So number one, changing your perspective that you're a soul and that you're just having this human experience, and not to judge it, but be kind of aware and just observe it. And if you go to a place of observation, much easier for you to go through life that way. Because that's really what we're doing. We're souls observing. And once we get caught up in the emotional chains, if you will, we get into trouble, because that becomes more important to us than totally observing. So yeah, you first have to have a sense of yourself. And everybody's a medium to one degree or another. It's like, some bakers or chefs or accountants, or they use it. It's all the same energy. It's using that creative energy and manifesting it in different ways. So it's all people, the musicians, the performers, housekeepers, whatever. It's just using that creative energy, which is open for all of us to use. And the channel I choose to use is a channel, use that creative energy, and to talk with the spirit world, to opening up my frequency and tuning in, if you will, or opening up to a higher level of awareness, which is the spirit realms, which are all around us. You see, they're all around us, but we have to open up to those higher levels of consciousness, if you will, to hear, feel, and see them. And that's really what it is. It's opening yourself up. It's surrendering yourself enough in your mind to be able to sense and hear. And you release control, because there is no control, but we think there is. And we just let go and surrender, and we become aware of these higher levels of states of awareness and consciousness. And the love energy from the spirit world never dies. They love you. They will always love you, even more so. And it's that love energy that they have and that you have that the link is made. That's how that link is made. So when I do a reading with somebody, it's the love from the spirit person and the love of that person who's seeking them that makes that event happen, that makes that chain complete.
Do we all have spirit guides?
We all have spirit guides. Every one of us have spirit guides. And those guides can be people that you've known on earth, like your parents or aunts or uncles or friends or partners, or they can be beings that you had other lifetimes with, or they can be beings who've never touched the earth before. Think of it as, I call it the spirit team. And it's those beings who are around you that support you in your work down here, in your classes that you're taking. Now, they can't give you the answers to those tests because they'd be cheating, and you have to go through the tests. They'd like to, but they can help you, and they do assist you as best as they can for you to see clearly, for you to make the right choices, for you not to rush into things. But again, it's up to you. You're the soul that's learning here. So you will draw to you all different types of guides or beings. Before we come into the incarnation, we sit with a group of guides and teachers and beings who it's kind of like a meeting we have to set up our blueprint, to set up our coursework, if you will. What will we be taking this time around? And we'll also talk about soul groups. So you'll have members in the group, family members, so as siblings perhaps, or a partner. And each one of them are fitting into a moment in time for you and for them that will help all of you to progress in your own soul way by having certain situations, scenarios in the lifetime. They've all agreed the soul group is really those souls who have been through many lifetimes together, and they learn together. So we learn as individual souls and also through soul group work. So the soul will come back, say family, and each one of them has different guides. So in one lifetime, you might want to express your, let's say, creativity as a painter. Well, you would draw to you that guide, that being, teacher, if you will, who is an expert in that field and will come close to you, whether through the whole entire lifetime or when you decide to do painting. And they will, if you will, bring forth, if you will, your gifts, your abilities. They'll help to bring them forth for you. Same thing in inspirational guides. And those guides are the ones who come to you and inspire, which means in spirit. So we call them philosophy guides or inspirational guides. But we all have many different ones and all different backgrounds. And it's about wisdom, guides to wisdom. And when we open ourselves up, Michael, to do something new, we will draw to us again those specialists who have done that before. So, for instance, you're doing these calls. You do your podcasts and your Skypes and Zooms. You bring to you a guide or guides who would know about how to help you in a way in your mind to do this work and to bring forth, if you will, certain guests that you have or how to make your show work, and they'll help you with that. The important thing to remember is we have to get out of the way. So sometimes we're in the way and we can't let spirit work through us because we want to control everything. And we're in control, and that's true of anything with humans. We want to talk to the dead father. I want to talk to my dead father. Why isn't he here? Well, because you're holding up that space by trying to control that space. If you surrender, it's easier for him to come into that space and inspire you or give you thoughts. But it's much harder if you're there. Come on, Daddy, I want to talk to you. You're setting up a wall. So same thing with guides. If you want to learn and be around the guides, you have to open yourself up. In our society right now, it's very much as you know, it's a quick fix, man. I need a quick fix. It doesn't happen that way. And spirituality is a progression. It's a process, if you will. Even developing as a medium is a process. You can't be undercooked. You have to go through the process. I have a lot of students in my school, my JVP School of Mystical Arts, a lot of student mediums there, and they want results right away. And I said, no. You need to bake for a while. You need to go through development and the process of going within and learning about your soul self, letting your soul expand. It has nothing to do with when you're going to give a reading. It's when you expand your soul self. Because as you expand your soul self to a higher level of vibration, you will attract those of a higher level because the universal law of like attracts like is in play. So the more you can develop spiritually and evolve that way, that you're going to bring higher levels of being. It's very, very true. When we jump into things and we're not prepared, we'll draw to us those beings who are not prepared. We're not evolved. And I've seen it happen. Unfortunately, to people that were jumping into psychic work and mediumship work, and they weren't prepared for it. And they say, oh, I feel like there's dark energy around me. Well, could be. You're opening yourself up to that because you're not preparing yourself. I sat in development for 7 years before I would do even one reading.
What does that mean?
I would sit in development, which is really developing your soul self. It's sitting in, if you will, a silent meditation, or it could be verbal. It's a group of people who sit together at least once a week, same time, usually same chairs, and they sit for a group energy to build that energy because one of those people in that group, or many people in the group, are mediumistic. And they really have to develop that energy within them and let the spirit guides around them work through them to develop their, if you will, their light body, their empathetic self, and open that part of them up. It's almost like work. I say things. It's almost like work on a car engine. You put up the hood and you change the valves and work things around. Same thing in development circle as you're working on the empathetic nervous system, the endocrine system of the vessel. It's working on the vessel, and it takes many times years for them to work on us so that we can really be open and receive correctly, and be healthy about it. You can't jump into it because you could end up being very, you could tax your endocrine system very badly, and you could end up getting dis-ease or some kind of ailment. So one's got to be very mindful and responsible for developing correctly.
Out on this tour, I get to ask, I'm assuming, and I do that through my automatic writing, but we're going to talk about other ways to do this. I get to ask, hey, if there are spirit guides who want to help me on this journey and keep me safe and help me to be the most magical version of myself, the most magical journey that we can have, please come in. Is it as simple as doing what I just did, or is there more to it?
I think that you have the intention, right? And they know, you don't have to say anything. They already know who you are. They already know your intention. They already know what you're doing, but it's that human mind that's got to catch up. The human brain thinks, I got to ask them to come through because and that's probably part of the process. But I want you to know that they're aware of you on the RV. They're aware of what's going to happen. They'll help you to make things happen. And the best thing you can do is keep that intention and then get out of the way. Don't overthink it. Because the moment we start overthinking, then we get to the earth mind. And it breaks things up. It's that control thing. So once we can just sit with that, set out that intention, and we know it's going to happen. Oh my God, how exciting this RV tour is going to be. And meeting some exciting people. I can't wait. What's it to meet next? That's where you should be right now. I can't wait. I know you are. And that's the way you want to do it because they already know it. They're going to take good care of you. And the fun things I would say for you, I'm just telling you something you already know probably, being on that tour is, wow, when am I going to see as I'm driving here or I'm waiting here, send me a sign, spirit guides. I want to see something cool and something unique. Now that you should have a good ask for. And that would be really fun for you to keep a journal on your trip and share with your people here about, wow, I've asked them to come through in different weird ways, and this is it. And you'll see a lot of synchronistic things. You'll see names of things. Your vision will be drawn to look at a certain thing, which is bizarre. That's a great way. I think you can have fun with it because it's all about amusement. It's all about joy. It's all about love. And I think it's a great trip. And the RV trip, that's a really great, if you will, analogy, I guess, of life too. You're taking an RV trip. And I think it's great. But I would say to you, they're already there. Now it's up to you just to enjoy it.
Stuff goes down. We're not in control. I always go back to the movie. What was it? Tom Cruise. He's racing around a car and he goes to the doctor after he gets rung his head in a concussion. And he's married to her for a while. Now I can't even remember his name. His co-star says, you think you're in control. You're complete and total egomaniacs. There is no control.
Correct. That's correct. That is correct. Except there is control in that. Every single person can control or not, but we cannot control another person. There's no way to control another person's thoughts, the way a person behaves. The only thing we can control is how we receive things. So, for instance, if someone says to you something negative, you would say, excuse me, but that's not meant for me. That's not, I refuse to accept that. That's inappropriate. That's not, you have to set up boundaries. That's where boundary work comes in. Very important. So you can control boundary work. And that's something I've had to do recently, because sometimes empaths and sensitives, they want to help people or they want to love everybody, but sometimes people take advantage of that, and you got to say, sorry, don't play that game with me. You have control over your own boundaries. If a family member is treating you right or a partner isn't treating you right, say, excuse me, that is not supporting me. If that's not to support me but brings me down, bye. Life's too short. And I went through a divorce recently about a year ago because my partner, 23 years, was in a position of not supporting me. I was supporting him, and it was not right. We weren't growing. I was growing, or he was growing in different ways, let's say. And it wasn't right for us to be in a relationship if it wasn't supporting one another. And it's true of everybody. And we all have control over that. We say, sorry, this is not happening in my life anymore, whatever it might be. And I think people, again, it all comes down to, Michael, life is made up of a series of choices. That's all it is. It's all a series of choices. And each choice is based upon two things. Either love or fear. That's all there is. Either love or fear. There's nothing else. Everything derives from love or fear. And we're responsible for how we live our lives. And we can blame others for putting us in this space, or my partner doesn't love me, or the kids have done this, or you can blame, oh, I was abused as a kid, whatever it might be. But we have to be the ones that have to take responsibility for each step we take. Because at the end of life, when we pass in the spiritual world and we have what's called a life review, every one of us will look back and see the choices that we made, good, bad, or indifferent. Do we bring love or fear? Do we treat that person in a very loving, positive way and encouragement, or do we hate them and fear and destroy them? So it's up to us. It's not going to be our parents or children there with us at the life review. We have to review our own lives. We're going to be there for our own test review.
Grounding. First off, today is the first day as we've set this up. I don't have my earthing mat here. Usually I'm literally plugged into ground during a show. What is ground? Actually, I'm already hearing you've got gardening.
That's right, gardening. So different types of grounding. So grounding comes into just being in the moment, centered in your being. Every electrical thing, device, if you will, person, everything electrical needs a grounding cord, including us, because we're electrical impulses, so made of electrical impulses. So we need to ground ourselves into the earth, Mother Earth. And Mother Earth, Gaia, is really there for us to be grounded. She, just by putting our feet on the ground, on the dirt, we feel grounded to her. We can lie down on her and feel it. We can tap our bodies, do tapping work, and that will get us grounded. We can touch something tactile, like a piece of ice or a pen or a cup, and feel that. We can look at some beautiful scenery outside, the tree or the flowers, and be aware of that. That grounds us. So being in the moment. So it's being in the moment. It's not thinking about the past, not thinking about the future, but being present in this moment now. And when you're in that space of groundedness and centeredness, you become more aware of what's going on around you. That's how you do it.
How do you communicate with the divine? You're doing this dance. You're going, I give it up. I surrender it. I offer it to you. It ain't mine. If you want this to come about, I need your assistance. And go into a place of listening so that you can hear clearly. Like I've got our book, Automatic Writing, behind us. We just came out with this year as a tool to listen. How do you do that personally?
Well, I think people are different depending on how they get information, and I'm really kinesthetic. So, and I've also found that for some people, this act of listening as if they're going to hear words can cause an enormous amount of delusion, because they're like, oh, I think I heard to move to Croatia, and they get to Croatia and they're like, that wasn't what I heard. So if you can hear that way, then that's terrific. But for other people might be more like me, it happens through the body, and I'll feel the tug. I'll feel literally the pulls. Call this person, don't do this, do this. And it's happening like an animating force inside of the body. When you just get that feeling of like a leap. It's called a spanda in Sanskrit. There's literally an inner leap.
Let's dive into the inner leap, because I want to go to another obscuration, another confusion here, which is to take that leap, that inner leap. There may still be fear, but that does not mean you're not being pulled or called forward.
Absolutely. And that's actually why I like listening to the body more than for myself, the mind, because the mind, I have Libra rising. The mind could have all kinds of contradictory opinions can be happening, because you can always see both sides of the story. So when I was trying to only make decisions from the mind, it was very conflictual. The body, to me, once it's been offered, it's almost like the opinion of the mind becomes secondary. So, for example, with this move that, is about to happen, my mind has all kinds of opinions about it. Tosha, what are you doing? You've been living in California for 30 years. You love it, blah, blah, blah. And yet the body is very, very calm, knowing it's the right thing. And on another day, the mind is very excited to go. But I just find that the mind is the nature of the mind with its endless shifting opinions. So when the action of offering occurs, whether it's, do I make this move? Do I take this job? Do I start this relationship? Whatever it is, once the act of offering has occurred, then I think the information comes to you however you are able to receive it. And so if it's kinesthetically like me, if it's more verbal like you, it really doesn't matter. You just start to get attuned to that.
How are you getting back to that place of love?
Well, for me, I think, well, what happens doing, okay, there's this part of It's Not Your Money, the last book that I did. There's this part of it in the second half where it talks about the 3 levels of offering. And the first level of offering is no offering, where you're basically just saying, I want what I want. You better bring it. I'm trying to manifest it. If you don't bring it, I'm going to be pissed. The level 2 is where intellectually it's starting to sound like a good idea. Like, oh, I'm in a lot of pain. I think I want to start calling in something greater than my ego to run things. But the truth is, I still want what I want. Then you get to level 3. And when you're at level 3, you're just exhausted. You're either exhausted or you're evolved, who knows which, or both. But something happens. Something starts to take over, and you no longer have an agenda. You're just literally saying, I'm truly open from the deepest level to wherever the highest path is meant to go, wherever I can be of the greatest use, however you want to say it. So what I found, we might as well, since we're both in the middle of moves, we might as well talk about the move. For me, with the move in the beginning, because it took about 1.5 years for it to really unfold. In the beginning, there were all kinds of opinions in the mind, because that's what we do as humans. But then it became, okay, I'm really deeply offering this to be shown the highest outcome and the right place. And all these different options kept coming and coming and coming, but I kept waiting for that inner leap, that sponda, because the mind was like, oh, well, maybe you should take this. And then you get all the shoulds from other people, right? Oh, you should do this, you should do that, but it doesn't feel right. So you're just with the body. And then finally a place came and it was right. And we took it, but the process took about 1.5 years because it just wasn't time yet.
There's a term that came up when I was going through your deck today and going on your Facebook page and looking into where you're at right now, which is fierce voice. There is acceptance does not mean that you stuff down the fiery side, that you do not bring the goddess Shakti out, that you do not voice up. What can you tell me about that?
I just think what you said is absolutely right on. And to me, it's kind of an embodiment of the ferocious divine feminine that really everybody has, regardless of gender. To me, it's really not just about women, because there can be men that very much are also in touch with the sacredness of that divine feminine. But that energy of, again, to me, the divine feminine has kind of been mistaken as just, oh, she's the moonlight and you're just yin and you're just receiving. And it's like, holy God, just go check out Kali, check out Durga, check out all the ladies that ride on the tigers and the lions, and, check out Eris, who is currently very strong in the sky. There are these embodiments of the divine feminine that are ferocious. And they are love. They are a form of love that isn't really talked about much in this culture.
Tell me more.
Well, I think that is the time that we're in right now, because just to throw a little astrology in this, Eris in the sky is now throughout 2020 and 2021. She's making a square to Pluto, the god of death and rebirth. And Pluto is the planet that, to me, is very connected to Kali. So these two goddesses are really dancing with each other. And because it takes 550 years for Eris to make a circle around the zodiac, it's unusual that we're alive right now for this. And so to me, it really is the waking up of that ferocious divine feminine. And whether you see that through, when the Me Too movement started to emerge in 2018, or whether you see it now with some of the appointments that Biden's doing, where women are coming into and people of color are coming into the administration, that to me this is all like the inclusivity of bringing in the people whose voices have been left out, and specifically women.
Woohoo!
Yeah, no, it's exciting to be alive for that.
It's huge. It's huge. Let's take that as an internal journey. Particularly people who have been listening to the show are empathic. They're more sensitive. In fact, I had Anita Morjani on recently. Sensitive is the new strong. And because of that, many of us have a hard time, many of the listeners have a hard time with this balance of passivity and fierceness and knowing how to discern. How do we do that?
Well, one thing I can say is that there's I don't usually promote this way, but there's a course on my website called The Holy Battle. And it's, okay, well, there's a course called The Holy Battle, and it's actually about what you just said. And it's actually, how do you tap that ferocious energy on the inside and allow it to do the speaking through you? So that's one thing I would say is this: if you have a lot, especially if you have a lot of Pisces in your chart, or a lot of Libra, or a lot of Cancer, and you tend to be that empathic energy that's always, you don't want to necessarily rock the boat, you don't want to upset people, you tend to be sensitive and flowing, but you're missing that power that lets you stand in your truth. That course is really good for that. But I would say the way that it happens is by, in part, this has been my own process, inviting it, and I think that anybody can build a relationship to that inner ferocious divine through invitation. It's like getting to know a deep, secret, hidden part that the culture, especially with women, has said, be nice, tamp down, that's bad. And then you start tapping it and you're like, there's nothing scary about this. It's just an aspect of yourself that's been dying to come out.
And my guess is, if we challenge most people anyway, there is a rare exception to every rule. Most people who are on this spectrum, to bring out that inner strength, to bring out that inner fierceness, to bring out a little bit of the Kali inside of them, while they're afraid they're going to go way too far, it's probably just not possible.
Yes, that's true. And I think also, the issue that comes up in all of this is doership. It's where we started this whole conversation. If you're inviting this force of fierceness and truth to speak through you, to act through you, then you're not really dealing with, oh, what if I do it wrong? What if I do it right? What if it's too much? You're really just in the state of saying, act through me, talk through me. I mean, it just happened when I had to make the call to my publisher. It was like, I didn't want to do that. I have Libra rising. I don't like having to make waves about anything, believe it or not. And then there I was on the phone going, every person needs this card who bought the deck. So something else starts to have permission to speak through that I think for some of us has been silenced growing up, but not killed. That's what's amazing is, when they talk about that little, the flame that isn't put out, that little simmering flame, you still have it inside.
Would you say, I love to use the term cosmic setup.
Yeah.
That everything is happening, not just for our highest good, but for our growth, for our expansion, for us to step into ourselves, for yourself to say, I'm Libra rising. Boy, am I being called forward in this one. Are these cosmic setups?
Yeah. I mean, I think that the only reason that I hesitate a bit with that is that sometimes I hear people say that about things in this world that are horribly unjust and terrible. A woman gets raped and then somebody says, that was a setup. You called that in. And I'm like, wait a minute. You're living in a culture of misogyny and violence. So it doesn't work. It only works as part of the larger paradox. But I would agree on one side of the equation. Yes, at every moment, we're endlessly getting the curriculum of the soul to go ever more into love and truth and power. And we also live in an insane culture.
So true on all accounts. We won't even go into the full insanity. I'm going to go to the other word that you used. Because we're talking paradox today, and I'm loving this conversation, Tosha, because we're talking surrender, and we're talking fierceness, and we're talking it's not mine, I let it go, and we're talking power. What is power, and how do those fit together?
I think that only these topics can only be understood through the idea of paradox, and that too often, especially in spiritual communities, you get people either fixating on one end of it, which is surrender, and it all just means like passive bliss and saying yes to everything, even if the thing you're saying yes to is horribly destructive, or it means power, 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 going and getting it all and doing it all and forcing it. And instead, you're like the still point in the center, holding both ends and inviting love to do the doing through you. And sometimes what somebody says to me is they'll say, how do I know if I'm out of the way? And I usually, for myself, it's when there's detachment about the outcome. And it doesn't mean I don't have preferences, but when there's detachment about the outcome, you're basically out of the way, even if the mind, of course, has preferences.
Oftentimes we confuse surrender with letting go of preferences, or even feeling guilty for having our preferences.
Right, exactly. And that's, again, to me, the loss of paradox, because the surrender is the intentional attunement with something greater than the ego. At the same time, we're in human bodies. So, of course, there's preferences. And so to me, it's almost painful to watch the gyrations that people go through sometimes of spanking themselves and blaming themselves for having preferences or even attachments. That just comes with being human. But I think that the part of the paradox that's very powerful is allowing those to exist and then offering them. Like, that's to me the beauty of offering. You're not saying, I'm bad because I would prefer to live somewhere with a mountain view. You're not bad. Who knows how many lifetimes you may have lived somewhere with a mountain view. And there's an encoding in the soul that's longing for that. And because it's been offered to the divine, you start to just trust on this instinctive level that what's right is going to come next. So either the right place with a mountain view is going to come, or you'll have something to learn by not having that about releasing the attachment to it having to go that way.
Automatic writing is perhaps the most cutting-edge tool for connecting with the other side, which is why we've written the definitive guide called the Automatic Writing Experience. To find out more, simply visit automaticwriting.com. It's my favorite way to help you to shine bright. Woohoo!